Buen Camino, pilgrims, and welcome back to the Sacred Steps podcast. On this show, we're walking virtually alongside pilgrims and authors, connecting a community of pilgrims from across the globe. I'm your host, Kevin Donahue, pilgrim, backpacker, and author of Sacred Steps, a pilgrimage journal. On today's episode, we're walking virtually alongside pilgrim Christian Clifford, who recently became one of the first 50 pilgrims to complete the more than 800 miles of the California Missions Trail, which connects the 21 Spanish missions between San Diego, California, and San Francisco. We'll discuss this American Camino experience, as well as the Spanish saint who helped establish the mission system along America's Pacific coast. Stay tuned after today's episode for details of our upcoming show. And be sure to click subscribe on your podcast app so that our episodes download automatically to your device. And now, on with the show. Let's welcome Christian Clifford to the Sacred Steps podcast. Christian Clifford, welcome to the Sacred Steps podcast.
It's great to be here, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm so excited to have you on the show because you and I first connected by way of the California Mission Walkers Facebook group. I was researching the California Mission Walk along the Pacific coast of the United States, connecting the 21 Spanish missions, and you have actually completed now the California Missions Walk. So I want to first introduce you and a little bit about your background, your connection to the California Mission Walk, and a little bit about your pilgrimage story. So if you wouldn't mind, share with us a bit.
So I'm from California, born and bred, and I went to Serra High School in San Mateo, and it's where I currently teach. And to be honest, I didn't know too much about Serra when I was hired to teach history and theology at my alma mater. And I made it a real point to go and learn more about the school's founder by visiting the missions. At the time, I was single, so I'd go on road trips to visit friends, and I'd pull over and check out the missions. I'd start reading about him, and I really started to fall in love with California mission history, and in particular, inviting on my faith journey the founder, Saint Junipero Serra. And I met a couple of the walkers, California mission walkers. So I kind of put that in the back of my mind, like, hey, that might be something enjoyable to do someday. I pulled the plug and said, I'm getting off the couch and I'm going to go walk to the missions, God willing.
Well, I definitely want to ask you a little bit about that, but I'm so intrigued because you brought up Saint Junipero Serra, who founded the mission system in California, and many of our audience aren't familiar with the California missions. Maybe as a history teacher, as a published author on Saint Junipero Serra, maybe give us a little background on the California mission system.
July 1st, 1769, Junipero Serra, and I think is a couple hundred soldiers and colonists came up from Baja California. Junipero Serra had already been in Mexico for about 20 years, and he was relatively old, and he was already ministering to people who were Catholic. I guess we'd call them like lapsed Catholics, or they didn't have permanent priests there to minister to them. So he kind of re-evangelized the faith, and that was in just north of Mexico City. The viceroy in Mexico City, the king's representative, tapped him on the shoulder and said, we want you to go to Nueva California and to set up missions there, because once a native Californian or Native American in California or indigenous, was baptized freely. The adult had to learn about the faith before freely accepting. Infants could be automatically, upon request, baptized. They also became Spanish citizens.
The missions move from Baja California up to Alta California, what we know today as Alta California, and a mission system is created beginning in San Diego. And then I guess as the feudal system was set up in around each of these missions, it then progressed further north. And my understanding, Christian, is that the missions then sort of were founded on a northern expansion up through California.
Yeah, so how it went was the first one was San Diego, and it was fledgling. It was not a success initially. It's a wonderful story that Portola was the commandant in charge of the soldiers, and he used to go to Monterey. And the reason why Monterey was significant is Sebastian Vizcaíno was an explorer, and he mapped the area for the King of Spain and said, hey, this is a great port. You know, someday you should plant the crown here and the cross and for civilization. And they took out this map and they said, go find it. And actually, they walked right past it. And they ended up finding San Francisco Bay instead. And of course, we know that's one of the greatest natural harbors in the world, San Francisco. So they did find it on their way back to San Diego. But this is a great story because of it gives us great insight into Junipero Serra. When Portola came back to San Diego, he's like, oh, this is miserable. Guys are dying left and right. Let's head back. This is not a success. And Junipero Serra said, we are partners in this. This is what we call today as the sacred expedition, right? And it wasn't just a government endeavor, but also a church endeavor to evangelize, to bring the gospel to the natives. But anyways, he said, give me 9 days. In Catholicism, we call it a novena. It's 9 days of prayer. And he said, we're going to pray a 9-day novena to St. Joseph, husband of Mary. And if the second ship does not show up with our supplies, I'm with you. We'll go back. And they did. They prayed for 9 days. And on the 9th day, they're starting to pack up. They see in San Diego Harbor a ship's mast, and they were saved. They were saved. Eventually, Serra made his way to Monterey, and he celebrated a high mass, and they founded the second mission, San Carlos de Borromeo. And that was initially right there in Monterey. But Serra said, after about a couple of years, we got to move this because the Spanish soldiers are not good to the native people who we're trying to bring the gospel to. So they're seeing two faces of the crown, one good, one bad. So he ended up moving it further away to near the Carmel River. So again, away from the soldiers. There's a constant theme with Serra saying, hey, enough's enough. You can't treat the natives poorly. We're here to bring salvation to them. And they're not going to listen to us if you guys are, doing these things. So so it's not in real order. Like, first was Mission San Diego. Next was Mission San Luis Rey. It didn't quite work out that way. The second was at Carmel or Monterey. The third was at San Antonio de Padua. So you kind of get the idea. It's kind of spotty. And Serra ended up founding the first 9 of the 21. His predecessor, Father Luswain, who was Basque from that part of Spain, he founded the next 10 or 11. He actually founded more than Serra did. And then one of them, the last one founded at Sonoma, was the only one founded under the Mexican flag, after the revolution, and Mexico was founded as an independent country.
Christian, I want to ask you, because you mentioned that Saint Junipero was really focused on the expansion of Catholicism and bringing the Christian gospel to America's native tribes.
Mhm.
There are always some negative and often bloody episodes that happen with what we can only call colonialization, when the Spanish brought the armies and galleons to California. Um, Saint Junipero Serra is was sainted for being an evangelical in
That's right.
California, and the missions today celebrate his evangelical role for the Catholic Church. Could
Mhm.
you give us a quick glimpse of his role as an evangelical in California?
For the lack of a better word, he was zealous for the gospel, and he wanted nothing more than to bring the gospel to people who never heard of it before. Now, he never, like I said, I alluded to earlier, he didn't get that chance until on his way to San Diego, uh, just probably late June 1769. They're walking north, and he literally a couple of natives uh, came towards the camp, and they were naked as jaybirds. And he said, "Oh my gosh, as naked as Adam and Eve in the garden, here they were." And that's really what he was hoping for his entire life, was to bring the gospel to people that didn't know it. Now, he was challenged by that because there is little evidence that does show that he tried his best to learn native languages, but he wasn't very successful. Um, I think it was with the Pame Indians north of Mexico City initially he tried, and he had great success there in re-evangelizing them. But when he came here, it was so much more challenging because you referred to native tribes earlier in the question. In California, they're actually tribelets. So it's like there's a group of 50 like connected families who had some cultural connections with a tribelet next to them, but also they had some histories where they had conflict and so on. So when he founded, like at Monterey, Mission Carmel, there were 5 different language groups of natives there. So they didn't get along, and they couldn't even speak to each other or partially, you know. So that's why Spanish was taught as the medium of instruction. Now, today, some native groups, say it was, unfortunately, they say genocide, but what they mean is cultural genocide. And of course, I just said, hey, come on, it was a practical thing to spread the gospel. He tried, but he wasn't very good at learning the languages because he was an adult, and I guess that wasn't his. Even though he's brilliant in philosophy and theology, he was a professor of sacred theology back in Mallorca in Spain. He kind of had some difficulty with learning languages, but we do see evidence, like at Sitjar, Father Sitjar at Mission San Antonio de Padua. He wrote a catechism in the local language for the native peoples there. So it was a challenge. Let's say that it was a very difficult challenge, but he was up for the task. He went all the way to Mexico City, go to the viceroy and say, "Hey, enough's enough. First of all, who's in charge here? Is it the priests in charge of helping the natives, or is it the soldiers in charge of helping the natives? Because it better be the priests, because the soldiers aren't treating them very well at all." So some historians refer to this as like they coined the term Native Bill of Rights, right? Because it's a great example of Serra being ahead of his time. But he was clear in his writings that the natives were endowed by their creator, our creator, with a soul, and they were children of God who, if done right, would be receptive to the gospel message.
The 21 Spanish missions that connect California from San Diego through San Francisco give us the names of so many um, towns that we're familiar with today. The missions themselves remain as active churches and parishes in their communities. So I wonder if you would tell us a little bit about your walk on the California Mission Way, and maybe give us a few highlights of the route.
I'm a member of the Facebook group for California mission walkers. And I thought to myself, hey, that's a good way to kind of keep my mind occupied. So I want to say that was like a Thursday morning. And I said, you know what? Friday, I'm going to start walking. And, I was a Boy Scout, and I was in the Navy. I was a submarines. And I'm like, how hard can this be? And got my pack ready and some water and headed up there to Sonoma about 5 o'clock in the evening on a Friday, and got out of my car and started walking. And I thought I was going to die. By the time I was like, I could see my hotel, and I'm like, am I going to make it to my hotel? It's only about 500 yards away. I had blisters and sores, and I was just wearing the wrong shoes. I was not prepared at all for the challenge. I learned a lot over time through friends, through mission walkers on, how to take care of one's feet and the best types of shoes, or a great community to learn about those things. I was very pragmatic about my walk. I actually have a map at home of California, and I put little red pins in the missions that I had not been to, and then I'd turn them to black once I had already when I visited, and I got my passport stamped. I changed it to black, and I would write in there, the walk. I'd pencil it in. It was eventually I pieced it all together, and I think the 49th to finish since 2014, since the Mission Walkers were founded.
You mentioned the California Mission Walkers Facebook group, and we'll link it in the show notes below, because there is a whole community to support those who are interested in walking the 21 missions along California's Pacific coast, because some support is needed. This pilgrimage is quite different from the Camino de Santiago in that the infrastructure is very, it's underdeveloped. Christian, I want to ask you, because this is a walk that is uniquely California, in that you go through all of the topography and geography, for the most part, that California has to offer, including its unique ecosystems. So as you're walking, you're along the Pacific Ocean, you're walking through some of the more mountainous regions, you're walking through some of the farmlands, and definitely the more urban dense areas. And paint a picture for those who might be considering the California Mission Walk of just the diversity of landscapes that you encounter that really represent the different regions of California.
So can I go back real quick to the point that you made about it's not really set up like the Way of St. James?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
The California Mission Walkers are very supportive. They freely, most, give their email. Plenty of really good people whom I would have probably never met in my life offered assistance. And if they couldn't, I just said, can you please pray for me that I safely make it to my destination? And I'm pretty sure people did. And that was really wonderful. But in terms of the topography, so California is like a bowl. And you have in the east, the Sierra Nevadas. And on the west, right along the coast, you have the Coastal Range Mountains. And in between, for the most part, you have some of the greatest valleys, agricultural valleys in the world, right? Sacramento, San Joaquin valleys, for example. I think it's pretty comparable. The Coastal Range here with the Pyrenees, the portion of the Pyrenees in northern Spain. I think the Pyrenees might be a little taller, but not much. So the most challenging walk I did in terms of elevation was sea level at Refugio State Beach in Central California, northern Santa Barbara County, to Refugio Pass. I want to say it's about 2,600 feet gain. And that's really the most challenging part in terms of incline. But it's beautiful. I mean, California has the reputation it does in terms of natural beauty because it's true. I walked along San Diego. The beautiful white beaches of San Diego County were just amazing, and the people watching was amazing. The area just north of San Diego, Mission San Diego, is really difficult because there's mesas. I mean, you're going up, and then you're going flat for a while, and then you're going down, and then back up. I remember walking to San Luis Rey de Francia in Oceanside, and I'm like, oh God, please tell me this is the last mesa, please, because I don't know if I could take another one. And lo and behold, I had to take another 2 before I actually made it down to Oceanside and the Mission. But and then the urban areas, of course, of Orange County and Los Angeles County. And then, interestingly enough, you get to San Fernando Valley, Chatsworth, the city of Chatsworth. And there's a lot of, even being born and bred California, I would have never imagined horses, lots of horses out there. And very rocky terrain. It's almost like a moonscape of sorts. And very deserty. And then you make your way over to the coast again to Ventura and the beaches again. And like I said I write in my book, the Beach Boys soundtrack went on loop again after being about 140 miles away from the beaches. And then I'm referred to Refugio Pass. And then you kind of get into Santa Ynez Valley, which is kind of higher up, probably about 800 feet, 1,000 feet. And then you're flat again in agricultural lands for, boy, it's got to be a couple hundred miles. And then you get to San Luis Obispo, and then you go up Cuesta Pass on 101. And I walked along a trail on the side there. I forget the name of the trail, with somebody I met from the Californiamissions walker. She was a local there. And her name was Stephanie. And then you get up to another higher kind of plateau of sorts. And that's Central California. You start entering the Salinas Valley. And then, of course, after that, you get to the redwood trees of the Santa Cruz Mountains, that part of the coastal range. And that's very beautiful. And then you enter the San Francisco Bay. And that's about it. And then you get to Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley, and you get the grapes and the wine, and get to celebrate, I guess, once you finish.
Yeah, you say that's about it. That's about 800 plus miles of one of the most ambitious pilgrimage walks that one could make. And then you're in each of the missions. The missions today are really bastions of their communities. Some have been named basilicas, but all of them have prominent roles, even today in the 21st century, in their local communities. Can you maybe just give us an update for people who aren't familiar with the missions themselves? What are their active roles today? Are they historical, or are they working parishes in those communities?
Yeah. So first of all, for the listeners and viewers, a basilica is a designation by the Pope that Catholic Church has great, usually historical and or cultural value. Of the 21 Catholic missions in California, 18 are active Catholic parishes. And that's one of the most inspiring things. I remember an example of that was when I went to Mission San Fernando, and I've been there many times, driving and visiting with my family by car. But I walked there, and I went in the back of the church to say a prayer of gratitude for, a safe journey. And there was a baptism occurring. I think it was 3 infants and a young child being baptized. And it was in Spanish. And it almost gives me chills just thinking about it, how interconnected I am with this passion of mine, this devotion of the California missions, this devotion I have to St. Junipero Serra. It's all connected to that, to that history.
We're talking with Christian Clifford. I'll link his books below on St. Junipero Serra, as well as his upcoming book, Connecting the California Missions Walk. I also want to point out that for those that are thinking about this and have heard Christian's explanation, there are some areas that are a little more ambitious for walkers than others, and some areas that are easier. I'll link in the show notes below because we have all of the GPS files that you can download. But if you come upon a section that you're struggling with, remember this has modern infrastructure available. So the Amtrak Pacific Surfliner can take you from city to city. If there are sections that you need to catch because you didn't get before, or if you feel like a certain section may be a little too ambitious, you have the opportunity to maybe bypass one section and take in another section as you may be more comfortable. So we'll outline that in the show notes below. Christian, in the time that we have left, I want to ask you briefly about your next steps, because you have a book coming up about your walk on the California Missions Way and finding El Camino Real, the original path through California.
I made it a real goal to, before I'd start a portion of the walk, to research the Franciscan friars and the native Catholic people who lived there. They were faith-filled people who were trying to live faith-filled lives, and it was really inspiring. So I incorporate their stories into my story as I walk, and pretty proud of it. And I think it reads well, and it's not a play-by-play, but I think will inspire readers to walk the California Missions Trail and to learn about the California mission history and be inspired by it.
Our guest today has been Christian Clifford, historian, educator, mission walker on the California Missions Way. We'll link his book in the show notes below, as well as some of the topics we talked about today. Stay tuned after this episode for a preview of our next show. Christian, thank you so much for coming on the Sacred Steps podcast. It's been great to learn about the California missions, about St. Junipero, and the history of the missions in California. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
On our next episode, we're walking virtually alongside Dr. Philip Adamo. A retired professor of medieval history, Philip is one of the world's leading experts on Catholic monks. Prior to his academic career, he worked as a circus clown for Ringling Brothers in the United States, a job which honed his skill of being able to read and understand people. His latest book, Pilgrimage for 8, brought together 8 strangers to recreate a 13th century pilgrimage across the entirety of France, England, and Scotland. We're discussing this modern-day Canterbury Tales with Professor Philip Adamo on the next episode of the Sacred Steps podcast.